I've always felt from the beginning that it was a novel, and I think for your thesis you called it a novel, and that's never been in doubt for me. I feel like when asked to describe it, it can be hard to describe. It's easy to read, but it's hard to describe because you have sections where there's a character named Ben, or these other characters who are clearly not you. You may have drawn from some of your experiences to inform those characters, and then there are these another type of story or section that's in the book. I would describe them as lyric essays that are done in this kind of fragmentary way, where there's a sentence or 2 or 3 sentences, and then a bit of white space, and then another one, and another one. And this can go on for 5 pages, this could go on for 20 pages, almost like an incantation. And people seem to, for example, on the Jimmy Kimmel show, the question is like, is this James Franco or kind of the persona? Where does one end? Where does one begin? I mean, I have my own ideas about how this fits in with the book as a whole, but maybe you want to talk about how you came to write those. I would also add that this came later in the process. If I remember, we were at least a year into the sort of thinking and editing when you suddenly sent me all this kind of new voice, this new tone that I hadn't heard before. But do you want to talk about that a little bit and how you came to write those?
Yeah, I think those came last, as you know, and I think what I was always looking for from the beginning was a way to be both very specific about some things when writing about acting or life in Hollywood, that that was a world that I knew. Struggling as an actor, coming up as an actor, all different kind of levels of success as an actor. Those are things that I knew, right, because I'd experienced. And so I wanted that, but then I felt like I wanted a way to present those details, but then also be able to kind of have the book extrapolate from that, so that it wasn't just, at least my hope was that it wasn't just telling about characters in a world that I knew, that it was pointing to something bigger. And then also that it would be kind of me, that you would feel the authenticity because it was based on stuff that I knew, but also that you could feel like, well, maybe it's him, but that's not the point. The point isn't to, get to know James Franco better. The point is to feel the, experiences that these, characters are going through. And so early on, there were a bunch of stories that are not in there. And I saw on your sheet there's a question about Palo Alto and how did that influence this book. Yeah. And there was originally a set of stories that involved a character who grew up in a place like Palo Alto and dreamed about, he had different kind of relationships with acting and performance and movies. And then you see him after he goes to Los Angeles. And so when he's young, and so but I didn't want it to be me. There was parts of me in it, but there were other things that weren't me. And so I called the young version Shrimp, and then the older version the Actor, just kind of like a general thing. And actually, there was one of those stories that was published in like The Believer or something, called The Actor Prepares, and that was he's just called the Actor, and that was like my first kind of attempt to do what I was talking about, where it's kind of, there's specific things, but he's also this character that doesn't have a real name. So it's and then we kind of worked those out of the book, which is fun. I mean, that's a normal process. But late in the game, I was introduced to this writer named David Markson by one of my other teachers, David Shields, and he has these books that look like lists, But if you go and you study them, there are kind of arcs to the way the lists are presented, and there is, it's not a narrative in the sense that we're used to, but the way things reoccur, or themes reoccur, or motifs, or certain kinds of information, and how and when, makes it very readable. I mean, that's sort of one of the essential things that you think about when you are trying to write a book or make a movie or whatever. Okay, am I just trying to tell a straight story? If I'm not just trying to tell a straight story, is the way that I'm doing it going to be different but still readable? And Markston had somehow figured that out. And so I really liked his approach, and his whole books are lists, but I guess I kind of came upon this idea, or I just started giving this material to you, and once we started seeing it next to the more kind of traditional stories, to me it functioned in exactly the way that I wanted. It was sort of that kind of lever or fulcrum that would, when placed next to the stories, it's like, okay, here's one way to get at this material, and then here's another kind of voice that's almost speaking above, or speaking from. Sometimes the voice is tongue in cheek. Sometimes I like to think sometimes it's ironic. I mean, the only way I could write those sections was to say, okay, these are not James Franco's views 100%. This is some kind of arrogant smartass, and but maybe some of the things he's saying are true. But the main point of it isn't what are they true or not. The main point is to just provoke thought, to make people think about film performance, how those things play in our lives, because for the past 100 years, film has been the dominant popular medium. So it's had an effect on all of us, whether we watch a lot of movies or not. It's just, part of our world and worldview and just the way we look at the world now. But also to use performance and film as metaphors for looking at life. And so that's how I saw those things.